So hey, everybody, welcome. Thanks for joining my personal first webinar, and it gets to be on my favorite subject on NFTs and Web3. So I'm very excited. My name is Drew Rasansky. For those of you that don't know me, I'm the Web3 lead of Radicle. Before we jump in, a little bit about Radicle and our speakers. Radicle is a new market insights company helping the world's leading companies make better, faster, and more confident investments and decisions in the future through a custom network of startups and emerging tech leaders such as Shiv and Ollie. We built a platform specifically focused in Web3 around experimentation with three core pillars: educate, so upskilling and accelerating your understanding of Web3 and its implications specific to your business; activate, so connecting you to folks such as Shiv and Ollie, as well as build, so strategic Web3 work and concept development. With myself, I have two of my good friends, Shiv and Ollie. Shiv is the CTO of Lazer Technologies, and Ollie is the VP of Partnerships at Palm NFT Studios. And I've invited them to share their perspectives on the NFT market, how brands are participating, some of the interesting things and dynamics they've seen around brand participation. And for those of you that have been following this space right now, we are in what many are considering a crypto winter. So really wanted to get their perspectives on what they think about the market itself, and if and why this is actually the perfect time for brands to participate in the space. A little bit more background on both of them, and I'll let them dive a bit deeper, but Lazer has built some of the most successful projects in the NFT space. One of the original main catalysts, NBA Top Shot, they had a big hand in developing that, as well as perhaps the biggest, I think maybe the biggest NFT drop with 100 Thieves. So highly, highly experienced. And Palm has shepherded some of the entertainment's greatest IP, from Matrix to Batman, Sex Pistols, if you were listening earlier, from Ollie, and a host of really interesting IP, bringing them into the world of Web3. So really, really excited to chat with both of them. They're both extremely well positioned to share their thoughts with you, answer your questions, and brainstorm how to approach and navigate the Web3 space. Some housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in Zoom. I believe there's both a chat function as well as a Q&A function, so feel free to type them into either. The three of us will chat for about 30 minutes, and then we'll leave the next 30 minutes to get to all your questions. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. I've gotten to know both of you. I know both of you have taken some pretty interesting paths to get to where you are today, both with the Lazer and Palm respectively. Would love to hear a little bit about your backgrounds, how you ended up here. Maybe Shiv, let's start with you first.
Totally. Thanks for the warm intro, Drew. It's a pleasure, as always. So maybe I can get started with like little background on me, and then I can tell you guys a little bit about Lazer. So my personal background, software engineering. I'm like a product person by trade, love like building in the 0 to 1 space, hacking things together. In the past, I've built 2 startups. Both have been acquired. Then went on to build and grow Lazer with my fantastic partners, highly talented team, both engineer and design for the last couple of years. So now a little bit about Lazer. Like Lazer is a project studio. So we're a digital product studio. We're aimed at design and development for high growth startups, particularly, and large consumer brands. So today we're like 80 engineers and designers. We work with top VCs like Sequoia, Andreessen, Pear, Portage, Inovia, list goes on. And we basically help their portfolio companies build and go to market, as well as large consumer brands. So in Web3 particularly, we helped Dapper Labs build NBA Top Shot, which is like Hallmark project, NFL All Day, Genie's Marketplace, a bunch of others, and NBA and NFL particularly being those massive consumer brands. Now we're working with like brands like Adidas, Fox, Ford, many others to figure out what their next steps or first steps into the industry could be. And so, yeah, that's basically been our background and kind of how we've been involved in the space over the past couple of years. And so like our first NFT drop, for example, was like 2 years ago. So, and given how fast the space moves, we feel like dinosaurs.
Would love to hear, I mean, that's a great background. Like I mentioned, to build some incredible projects. How did you personally get indoctrinated as they say, into crypto and NFTs in particular, and Web3 generally?
Yeah, totally. I think our first experience with Web3 was like passing up on a really important investment into the Ethereum ecosystem very early on into our careers. And then we've just been following the space. Like we were some of the first users on like Compound, Aave, Rari, like SushiSwap and Uniswap and all those guys, right? So we've been super early on like we were doing lunch and learns across Lazer since day one of those products being introduced into the market, right? So since that, and also I think the Dapper Labs project was huge for us in terms of getting into the space deeper and also seeing it play out in such a magnificent way. Billions of dollars have been transacted on those marketplaces. So it's incredible to see the growth. And that's why we're super about being on the cutting edge. Like you have to be first movers in the space.
Absolutely. And we'll get into all that in a bit around brand participation. How about you, Ollie? I know you spent a couple of years in financial services. How did you get into Web3?
Yeah, I mean, I think when some of the tools like Nifty Gateway were doing drops early on, probably 18 months, 2 years ago, started being interested in what they were doing. And I've never had this day trading mentality, so was never going to be very good at taking advantage of it. But reading more about the technology after being somewhat of a blockchain skeptic when I was working in tech services, it was interesting to see how it could suddenly be applied. And, part of my skepticism was because I was dealing with innovation groups that were saying, I want something on blockchain rather than trying to find a problem for it. So all of a sudden I was seeing some of these capabilities, and with a couple of friends started building a side project as we were coming out, the first time we were all coming out of COVID, thinking about music venues based in New York, and thinking about small music venues and how could you help them sort of like come out of this situation and monetize things differently. And we were working with we had some friends associated with music venues that had, had sort of bragging rights where they'd had these famous artists that performed their first gigs at these venues. And there was nothing to monetize that process for the venue in the future. Just because in the 90s you had Oasis play in front of 110 people, doesn't really matter now, and you can't profit on that. If you would have given everyone that came to that event an NFT, and there was some sort of like in perpetuity royalties that you could get, you could change the game there. And we were thinking and started building a super light version of like a POAP or something associated to that, actually with Flow. And started working with a couple of venues as they were coming out of COVID. I then randomly got involved in a Warner Brothers movie NFT project that ended up not coming to fruition, but that's where I met some of the guys at Palm NFT Studio, and stayed in contact with them. And after a while found that I was probably spending more, my day job that I was salaried for became a side gig, and probably needed to reverse those things, and reached out to Palm about going to work there. And joined Palm at the back end of last year, and it's been really interesting. Palm is a side chain to Ethereum. It's been set up to be eco-friendly and specifically built as an NFT platform. And then we have a studio that is facilitating some large IP projects on it as well. And finding ways to expand that business development. And I would say that 95% of the projects that are either getting built on Palm or companies that come to us are not crypto native. So I'm dealing with a lot of people that this is their first foray into this space, and it's really interesting, discovering it with them.
Awesome. We'll save for a webinar for another time on L2s and side chains, because it's another super fascinating project or part of Web3 for sure. Related to that last part, you're talking to a lot of non-crypto native folks. Obviously, the three of us have dove down the rabbit hole, as they say. If you're working at a big brand today and you're dealing with a lot of these folks, why should any of this stuff matter? Is it just marketing opportunity, or is there a lot more, below the surface if you're working from a big brand? Maybe Ollie, let's start with you.
Sure. So one of the things that I think is interesting to brands is they've sort of figured out over the last few years, the monetary value of having someone's email address or someone's phone number. And over time and aspirationally, they'll get to the stage with knowing a wallet as well and having a relationship with a wallet, which isn't exactly a person, but it is a wallet. So there's a fascination for some brands there that are customer data centric. I think as well, in traditional fan models, you know, the three of us could all watch a YouTube clip and or all subscribe to a Patreon account, but you don't really know. It's very sort of like digital and not analog on like how much of a fan each of us are. When we do that, we all become a sort of one number associated with that. And you know, it could be the case that for that Patreon account, Drew would pay $100 a month to continue and maintain his fandom for that fan. It could be that you put the price up to $4.50, or you just remind me that it's $4 a month and I'm out. So Web3 has some very interesting tools that enable that sort of like dynamic participation and truly enable some companies to understand who their super fans are and also reward them accordingly.
No,
And
it's a great.
That's what we're focused on with a lot of brands.
Nice. It's a great point. I think that's certainly, you know, one of the more interesting use cases. I think a lot of perhaps our attendees here, and I don't want to speak for anybody, but they think of NFTs and they think either CryptoPunk or Bored Ape or perhaps just a generative piece of art that lives online, like the way that you got in Indoctrinated Ollie. Shiv, what are some other different types of applications and use cases that you've seen at Lazer around how brands are using NFTs?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, just building on Ollie's point, like it really comes down to the LTV CAC equation, right? And so a lot of these brands kind of look at those lenses. In terms of specific use cases, I would say like access passes are a really big one, whether it's like to specific events or essentially adding digital gates to your product. So perhaps you have a Shopify storefront and you actually want to block it off to only certain token holders. Maybe some of those that own the certain Rolex or certain Dolce & Gabbana fashion or whatever you want to call it, right? And the great thing is those access passes have liquidity in a public marketplace. So like you could sell it on OpenSea, or you could figure out other ways to perhaps give it to other people and stuff like that, right? Then there's like also the piece of like collecting the addresses themselves. So you do a big PFP drop, 10,000 or maybe unlimited, and you can collect all these wallet addresses, like similarly to how you would collect like phone numbers and emails, just as Ollie was saying, right? So there's this value as well. And in phone numbers, emails, like you have to figure out how to associate this data with the user and then extract value. With wallet addresses, you kind of see like what the wallet is doing, the activity on chain, and you can use that to kind of create the social profile for deeper marketing, like targeting and seeing what else they own and stuff like that, right? And then there's like pure marketing outreach, like exclusivity of like different brands doing cross collaborations and stuff like that. So you get their OG metrics of like impressions, conversions, but also some new metrics in the space, like the number of unique wallet addresses, for example, right? And then there's like re-engagement tools as well. So now you have their wallet addresses, you have their PFP or something, and you might want to airdrop them some new utility, as long as you associate some utility with this NFT or this new things that you're dropping, right? So yeah, there's all these different ways. And I think the last probably big one is, or there's two more big ones, I would say. There's like rewards, which is like, it just as Ollie was saying, like people are, using your platform, how long are they using it for? And maybe those NFT data can be dynamic in that sense. So you can really, really reward those users, right? And then we have like just raising a treasury. So like some of the smaller brands and stuff might want to just do an NFT drop and have a mint price, and all of that goes to some community owned treasury perhaps. And maybe the users can vote with what they want to do with that, and stuff like that. So yeah, we've seen all of those use cases come through.
Nice. And just as context for the audience, if you're not familiar, airdropping is basically when you have access to those wallets that Shiv and Ollie mentioned, you can essentially just create something and send it directly to those wallets of value. So I think one of the things that's super interesting that Ollie was, or rather that Shiv was alluding to, is there's also this flexibility element that once you have access to these people's wallets and the things that they're interested in, you can continue to add and build interesting and unique experiences and products directly for them to create, more affinity for you and your brand. Specific to those use cases, or perhaps outside of some of those use cases, maybe we'll start with Ollie. Are there any brand examples that people can go check out that are your favorites, and why?
Yeah, I mean, without wanting to be like too Palm centric, we put out some interesting projects. One that's in the marketplace now with people with Batman, and a roadmap that we went down that has created a significant amount of like DC crypto wallets with them, and some sort of like multi-year roadmap approach that I think is interesting. I also like, and this is maybe not like, but I think they did something with Bitski is a company that did something with Levi's at the Grand Prix in Miami, the F1, that do really interesting like activations, like one-off activations that are taking place that I think are interesting. We're going back to Palm. We're also trying to launch something with Archie Comics where owners in the NFT can participate in storyline. So getting people engaged in that way is interesting too. So yeah, there's outside of digital art, which I think remains a really interesting, and will continue to be a piece of the market that just grows. I think some of these brand activations and thinking through utility and exciting things that you can do on the back end of a project, there's some good answers out there. But I also think that most of the interesting ones are still to come, frankly. So a lot of stuff that we're in discussions with some brands that hasn't come out yet is more interesting than what I see out there. And it means it's exciting to be in the space, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. How about you, Shiv? Any examples that Ollie might have missed that you wanted to talk about?
I'll also try not to be too laser centric, but I think I have to give 100 Thieves a shout out. Like, I think 100 Thieves was a very, very interesting drop in the space, especially esports, because a lot of people in esports were not down to experiment with crypto until 100 Thieves made this first move. And so in that experience, they wanted to get to a non-crypto native audience. Don't watch like a 10-minute video. Just here's 2 clicks and you get a wallet and you get the NFT. You don't have to think about all the complex stuff like I need tokens to pay for the gas and all this other stuff that you'll see, right? So I think in that sense, they really catered it to that market segment, and they made sure the chain choice, the NFT itself, the way that the drop was done was really catered towards that segment. So I think in terms of a drop, 100 Thieves did a fantastic job of that. And they used some great ecosystem partners like Web3 Auth, Biconomy, and Third Web to kind of get those things done, right? Without having to create all of this infrastructure internally. And obviously they relied on Lazer as well, right? Then I think like a non-Lazer example I want to give. I really liked the Coachella lifetime access as tickets, right? So it's like really, really famous like festival. And now you have like lifetime tickets that will gain value over time and are forever present on the blockchain, right? So I guess like in terms of getting to the metaverse, here's like one specific piece that a brand has done to like kind of get there. And also it's in the same spirit of like gated access.
Yeah, exactly.
Drew,
Going back,
go
ahead, Ollie.
I'll give you one as
No,
well.
go ahead.
That I'm a participant in, which is a small D2C brand based out of LA called Malbon, Malbon, and they set up 1,000, not 10,000, like 1,000 NFTs, and those NFTs have been, they've really like carefully and gradually sort of added utility to them, where they've done token gated merch on their site where you can only buy certain products if you have the NFT. They've done collabs with the likes of Topgolf locations, giving perks and benefits to members. They've organized meetups and sort of like mini tournaments in different cities across the States for members. They've had gated Discord where you could video your swing, and a pro who's also a member of the community will take a stab at like giving you some tips. And it's just been really interesting to watch it grow from a brand that is not huge, and it is quite niche and really fits into this sort of like 1,000 true fan mantra. I think watching as a consumer of theirs, not involved with it from a tech perspective, watching how it's grown has been pretty admirable. I think they've done a good job.
Absolutely. Just to tie that in, so Keith asked a question related to liquidity working against history and relationships with a customer. And I think it's pretty interesting because Ollie, you made a point around you're the 1,000 true fans. And the thing that I think that's super interesting about liquidity is with the financial element, it's not necessarily the 1,000 true fans, but potentially you can create the 1,000 first millionaires from your brand. And so with like the financial incentive, even if they sell your asset or product, they could still be super fans because there's that open market element and it creates a feedback loop in essence. But to the extent that Shiv or Ollie want to add on to that question, feel free around liquidity, keeping history and relationships with a customer.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, and Keith, you can guide us in the chat if this is what you were getting at, but I think there's interesting opportunities and challenges that come from this. If I think about like a loyalty program for a casino in Vegas, right? All of a sudden, at the moment, I have to earn my status with a lot of loyalty programs, right? But I might go once every 3 years to Vegas and it would be great to have that top status, but I don't behave in the way that deserves it. And if you had a sort of like Web3 raw loyalty program, there's ways to sort of to benefit that liquidity to benefit someone like me, because I can buy in and then sell out on the program. And you don't learn a lot about me as a result because I'm not building a deep relationship to you. But there's different ways to service people like me that could be willing to buy in and then sell out of your program. And I think that opens up opportunities as well as it gives like a head scratch as well to like, well, what does that person then mean to me as a casino, you know?
Right. Maybe on the flip side, what are some things that y'all have seen from the brand side that just is not working and that brand should stay away from?
I can have
feel
a
free to
stab
go
at
first,
this
Shiv. Yeah.
one. I think like, for example, NFTs that have the only purpose as to sell to somebody else at a higher price. These are some things that are built to fail. And we saw that like this type of behavior happen in a bull market where it made sense. You have like more and more buy pressure. So you can do these types of things. But in bear markets, we can't do any of that type of stuff. And both of those things are destined to fail. And so looking at like floor price as a metric or doing PFP drops just to raise some quick money and exit, those things are short-sighted and are destined to not be successful, I would say. So looking at utility and adoption is probably the two most important pieces.
How about you, Ollie?
Yeah, I think also some brands have like made assumptions about their community that they would be interested in them, and you try and push in data on like, well, we have this many Instagram followers and this many Twitter people, so if you put this conversion rate on for NFTs, should be good. And there's just been not much good correlation between social media follower size and success of projects at all. And that's been learning for us in the community as well, right? It's been learning in this space. And you could take a celebrity that has tens of millions, if not more, of fans in this space, and it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to generate success, and it doesn't also mean that you sort of like help them learn along the way. There is an interesting project that's going on at the moment from not necessarily a brand but a celebrity, Mariah Carey, where it's a one-of-one NFT that they're selling, and that one person gets some experience with Mariah, and that's really putting like a value on fandom out there. To me, it's like a high risk, high reward project. And I think it's got a few more days left to go. So if people want to go and find it and put a bid on, so it's going to day Mariah Carey. But that to me, doing that with a lot of brands, I think you've got to really be confident in your marketplace and make sure that if you're doing that, you've done your due diligence on your fan base and you feel you have a good understanding that it's going to resonate with them.
That's awesome. I know, Shiv, you talked about the market a little bit and just keeping an eye on time. I do want to make sure we get to that. So things have obviously changed over the course of the last month or even first quarter or so. ETH is down 50%, Bitcoin down 50%, NFT volume has dropped. My portfolio is in shambles. What the hell is going on in the current market? What's causing this? And yeah, I'll stop there for a second.
Yeah, totally. So I think crypto is like this sub environment in a much bigger macro picture. And if you look at the macro environment, we have Fed increasing rates, spending is down, we've printed lots of dollars, inflation is really high, people can't buy bread and gas, they're not going to buy your NFTs, right? So we have like this giant, I would say, like, sell pressure. So we're just entering the next part of a bubble cycle, and our economy works in this way at a macro level, and same with crypto. We have, winters and we have summers. And so, I think the best growth businesses, like even Shopify and a lot of other tech stocks, are down to like, 20, 30, 40% of the value that they were at before, right? And so it's not just crypto. I think it's a lot of the public markets and everything like that. So there is a lot of bearish items that have happened, right? Like the public markets falling through. And then we have like some like bigger scams in the space that have also kind of wiped a lot of value, such as Luna and stuff like that. So we have some increased regulatory scrutiny. But I think we'll start to see bullish events happen as well, like throughout this recession and stuff like that. You'll start to see Feds dropping rates eventually, creating buy pressure, or like ETH merge happens, which another like bullish event and stuff like that. So nothing has really changed in terms of adoption though, and utility. Those are the things to focus on. And I think it's the best time as ever to kind of take a look at this market and find real value. Now you'll find real signals instead of those types of signals where people are just buying to sell later. So I think now we'll figure out where the real value really lies for builders, especially.
Maybe just jumping into that last part, you said now is the best time. Just expand on that a little bit more. What sort of signals? Why do you see this as a true opportune time for brands?
Totally. So I think if you look at the last crypto winter, that's when some of the biggest projects were started that then created the DeFi boom. So Uniswap was started, took 2 years to build, and then last year that created a huge boom in this market, right? So I think in this type of market, you'll see no more nonsense projects, no more founders coming up with one-liners and then raising millions of dollars, right? Instead, you're going to see more focus on fundamentals. And that focus on fundamentals is really, really good for builders. Now builders will be focused on like, true value, can actually see where does their product lie on this plane of product market fit, and which way do we need to iterate in to really get users onto this platform, decrease the cost of acquisition for brands, increase the LTV for those customers. And so those fundamentals are going to become really, really important. And so this is the only market actually condition that you can see this in. In 2 or 3 months ago, you would have, it's so hard because you're conflating all of these real value with kind of like fake sell and buy pressure.
How about you, Ollie? I know you're working with a lot of brands today, and I'm guessing many have the same concerns with the market. How have you been addressing some of these skeptics?
Yeah, look, I think Shiv said it beautifully there. So like make total sense with what he says. And then what's interesting on our side, because we're working with a lot of like traditional brands that already have a business up and running, and seeing this as an extension of it, rather than someone that's like starting up and trying to launch a Web3 company. Our chain is, there are many chains out there that sort of offering grants, and a lot of their value proposition in like getting activity on their chain is around the grants that can help like with those startup costs. They're less compelling to an existing brand. Getting 50 grand to build your project somewhere is like not nearly as compelling as some other value that a chain can add to you. And I think as a result, we're already dealing with people that are trying to deliberately and have a measured approach and thoughtful approach, rather than saying, I got to get in now because this thing's hot. So I don't think we've been exposed, or as like, and that's not through necessarily our design with the market changing like this, but I don't think we've been as sensitive as some other parts of the ecosystem to that change. But I think the way Shiv articulated it was exactly right.
Just expanding that piece a bit more. So there's the element of brands beforehand wanting to get in now and just throw something, out there. There's been brands such as Adidas that have created these really, really long and thoughtful processes. But right now, perhaps with the current environment, brands might want to run smaller experiments just to kind of dip their toes in and kind of test the waters. What are some of those ways in which brands can experiment on a smaller scale?
Yeah, I think
Ahead,
it's an interesting decision process that they should all go through, right? I think you should decide, is this project going to be brand centric? Are you tying it to an existing event that you do and you sponsor? So it's like time specific, or are you going to work with one of your brand ambassadors? And I think having a clear idea about which one of those you go in is quite important. And then, and this is for like a first foray right into the space. And then thinking, do I want this to be a long-term project where I'm now like managing a Discord and I'm doing all these things and I've got a community now that I need to like resource around? Or do I want to make this a finite project? I just make it a one-off activation where you either get something immediately and maybe there's some sort of collectible value to that NFT over time, but the immediate utility of it could be used. Like, someone did a VIP partner with a VIP party at Coachella with Tower Restaurant Group, and to get into that party, you needed a certain NFT. Like, that's done. Like getting that NFT now, and however you get it, whether you earned it or whether you found it or whether you bought it, doesn't matter now. So that's an interesting way of having a finite project with no need to manage a continual Discord community. And I think going through that process before you even think through the use case and what fans want is quite interesting, because it already puts some guardrails on your options, which can be helpful to making decisions.
Absolutely. Just kind of layering on that. I think brands don't have to they can start small and then they can make the decision later on whether or not they want to add stuff to it. So that Coachella example, next year, perhaps they could reward those that continue to hold that NFT. And they don't have to make that decision in the very beginning. There's kind of this flexible nature that I was talking about earlier that's really interesting when it comes to digital assets.
No, 100%.
Shiv, anything else? Or
I think Ollie said it so perfectly. Like, you have to look at the why, right? And then the purpose is super important as you build these first experiments. Because I think anyone could say, oh yeah, make an NFT drop, put a one-pager together and make it happen. But this will work so differently for different brands targeting different segments, and the why and the reasoning behind it. So it's really important to have like a strong strategic partner that is helping you learn and understand the space. And so, those types of partners have seen this stuff before. They understand how, having an unlimited drop versus certain number of drop or certain mint price. And all of these mechanics are complex and affect the nature of the drop. So it's important to kind of be cognizant of all that.
Awesome. Well, let's pause there. I have some other questions too, but I do want to make sure we get to Keith and James' questions in the chat. So perhaps starting with James. In a space that seems incredibly opaque, how do brands navigate the Web3 space to show customers that whatever they're doing has utility and value?
Yeah, I think there's more and more tools out there, and Shiva was probably closer to some of them than me, but tools that can help with those unlocks. And think about when you're launching a project, rather than a roadmap is coming, which was good enough in November last year, think about instant gratification or something that people are getting for getting your NFT. And there's a company called Unlock Protocol. It's doing some amazing work and to sort of like democratize this Web3 tooling. There's one called Lit Protocol. And a lot of these started with token getting access to Shopify page. And those use cases are just growing on top of each other. Whereas an NFT being a ticket, access to a Twitch, access to a physical event, access to merch, whatever those things will be, there's some great easy tools, very light tools to use now that are out there that weren't out there, a year ago.
Mhm. And I know this industry can sometimes like feel opaque, but I would say it's like, you have to get into the right channels so that you can get the right information flowing to you and you can understand and be immersed rather than feeling in the dark, I think. And so Twitter has been like huge for that, I would say. A lot of our communities are on Twitter actively posting about projects, posting about new things as soon as they happen. A lot of the activities on chain is public. So people are reacting to it in real time. And if you just start following the right Twitter accounts and maybe using some Medium articles to follow like the first set of seed like accounts and stuff like that, I think you can get pretty deep into the space pretty quickly with those Twitter algorithms just recommending you great content all around the industry.
Do you have any favorite Instagram follows or perhaps media pages that you want to recommend that folks check out?
Yeah, I think top one is DCF God. Check that out. He's on Twitter and super, super interesting. But yeah, there's a couple others I think I could share if time permits.
Yeah, I'm happy to follow up. There's one out there called Milk Road Crypto that breaks down stuff in very, very simple terms that I'm a personal favorite of, or it's a personal favorite of mine rather.
I love Milk Road a lot as well. It's very applicable wherever you are in the space. I would say, Drew, to one of your the questions you were alluding to earlier, like we're encouraging brands as well to sort of like we've done some like minting happy hours with a brand, right? Where they're like, everyone is going to mint an NFT during this, and you're all going to get a wallet, and we're going to set it up. And and Drew, we talked about maybe doing that with some clients as well. And I think there's ways that you can participate without putting your brand out there to learn about this space. And it could be as simple as getting a daily newsletter from Milk Road and participating and doing some of these things. And because of certain chains and now gas prices being significantly lower in certain options outside of Ethereum mainnet, it just opens up the possibilities to be trying things and doing things for free rather than needing a pocket full of ETH to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I think even on the brand side, the thing that I've seen that's super interesting is just brands participating on Twitter, just engaging with active community members, creating a wallet of themselves, buying an ENS address, which is basically a handle, more or less. And just those are simple ways that they can dip their toes in without even having to create an entire project or even sponsor something. So it can be doing the same thing that the average normal everyday consumer is doing as well. And Budweiser has been probably the best at that since the beginning, in my opinion. Moving to Keith's question, are there good design patterns around how to communicate with online relationships other than through wallet airdrops, which are pretty limited? Example, how do you surface offers? Does it have to be mobile notifications? What if they don't have a mobile wallet? Do you basically try to get their social media identity because wallet is too limited?
I think the difference between, say, a MetaMask or Coinbase wallet and some of these custodial wallets, where meaning basically that you access them with a username and password, they are much more centralized than as a technical philosophy. Some people would view them as like outside the realm and spirit of Web3, but they are a really easy launch pad to get people involved in some of the other capabilities of Web3. We have done several projects that have produced hundreds of thousands of custodial wallets within a few days. And I think that don't rule out the fact that you can get people on an element of this crypto or NFT platforming without needing someone to have a wallet first. And Shiv, you've probably got some good examples of how that's being used or how on-ramps you see that are where the friction is being taken out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
we talked about Polygon or 100 Thieves. I mean,
exactly. Like even with 100 Thieves, we were able to on-ramp people in 2 clicks, like very, very simple for the brand and this non-crypto native audience. We got 400K new wallets, never been in the ecosystem before, to quickly on-ramp. And even in like a country like or continent, like for example in Africa, they have something called Phone Bank, which lets you trade in airtime for crypto, right? And so you get this really dirty on-ramp into crypto without deep KYC, right? So, and I think like the question itself, like, how do we replace like notifications in this Web3 infrastructure? I think the way to look at it is not to try to replace Web2 primitives in Web3. Like Web2 is still going to be very strong and healthy in terms of like, this is how brands communicate and perhaps get like majority of the notifications or content out and stuff like that. But there's now this new underlying architecture of Web3 primitives, digital ownership that's like transferable and also gives you new data and new insights on these users. That is, fresh perspective from Web2. So for example, maybe in the future you have like, ERC20 tokens or like open web, like Web3 tokens that maybe are your points in FIFA 2020 that also get transferred over to FIFA 2021 and 2022. And so you have some interoperability between all of your different like platforms for this thing, right? So I think it's about also how like functionally the brand is taking in these new digital ownerships and reacting to it. So for example, that Coachella from last year, how are we going to react to that NFT this year and provide it more utility and value? So yeah, I think it holds a different space in the ecosystem. And so we just need to experiment deeper. And I think builders will do a great job of that during this crypto winter.
Mm-hmm. Drew, there's a company as well, which we like the look of, that actually started in outside of crypto, but has found space in it, called Laylo, Laylo. And they help aggregate interest in events across different social media, whether you're putting something on Insta, Twitter, wherever you are expressing you want someone to call to action to show interest in your drop or your event. And they've done a really good job of taking something that was successful in helping brands like aggregate records of interest in Web2 and bringing it into Web3. And they're a small team, and they're awesome and beginning to understand the space. So I think that could be a good help to people too.
Awesome. I'll check those out and we'll follow up with everybody. And then Keith actually just had a follow-up question. It seems like a wallet needs to also be a browser or something with non-trivial ability to practically present content and support interaction. MetaMask and Chrome on desktop is very far from that. I think I tend to agree.
I think there's so much room for improvement still in how things are going. And we've gone from the username and password of every site to Chrome saving your username and password if you want, to like log in with Google, to like now I have a Chrome extension that's not even me, but it's like some wallet that is associated with me. And all these different ways of like the evolution of sort of declaring your presence on a website. And they'll improve. There's so much room for improvement. I agree with you though. I think they could do that. I personally prefer the look and feel of the Coinbase wallet, and some of that is just visual because it's like the way it categorizes the assets in different ways. But like that's a very simpleton way of looking at things. It's just like how my brain works, I guess. But yeah, I would try different ones out there. It's also going to be it's not just the wallet, but who's interacting with the wallet. So how do they improve the experience? So you've got a brand that maybe Shiv works with, and they don't own their own wallet, but they want to interact better with MetaMask. What are they doing to help? And how can they improve that experience? So
maybe we've talked about kind of building the space right now. If I give you both permission to, forecast what this space looks like, either at the end of the crypto winter or in a year, what are you guys both thinking about around what the NFT and Web3 space will look like in particular? Maybe Shiv, will start with you.
Mm-hmm, totally. I feel like, firstly, like we've seen tons of companies right now that are making big bets on like, how will wallets be in the future? So they're actively rebuilding MetaMask and all these interactions into more social wallets, or more wallets with different feeds, or actually give you notifications or things like that, right? So there's a lot of experimentation, but what's great is that once they crack this in a really good way and solve this problem, it's solved for particularly almost everyone in the space, as long as they're on the same chain. So when Google cracked like social sign-on and like, you can now press a number to sign in, only Google can use that, and it's very proprietary. Whereas what we see in Web3 is once it's solved, it's like solved. So now you can just use it. And so that's, I think, the beauty of the space. And if you take that trajectory at a 12-month like time horizon, I think we'll see a lot of these experiments like come to fruition and completely change the way how we use the internet. I think there's a lot of different experiments that will pan out and won't pan out, but I overall think just looking at the speed and the trajectory of the space, a lot is left to the imagination to change. So I think it's hard to predict exactly what products there would be, but just that fundamental philosophy is so prevalent throughout the whole space.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is that so much of this, pretty much all of this, is in the public domain. So every single time there's an interesting mint or project, you see all of the next ones building on top of that. So the speed at which the space is innovating, whether or not we're in a bull or bear market, is still going to be great.
Exactly, and it would probably beat out any Web2 kind of speed that we've seen in the last 10 years, right? If somebody cracks how to do hiring in a decentralized way, it's cracked for all of these decentralized autonomous orgs, right? Or things like that.
Absolutely. How about you, Ollie?
I think that the participation brands is going to be key, right, to sustaining some of this and it not just being a niche part of tech rather than it being like somewhat ubiquitous. And I think for that to happen, compliance and regulatory is key. And anyone working in that space, I think is going to be really busy and has a great opportunity to differentiate themselves from other players in the market, because it's been an area that some people have not been very focused on, and that's going to be really difficult to unravel, I think, in the next 12 months. So I wish I could just be talking about like creativity and things like that are more exciting, but actually regulatory and compliance, it's going to be massive, and unfortunately it's going to like make or break some really good players in the market.
Awesome. Last question, and then I have one final one myself. Keith asked a question around DAOs. How have you seen brands delegate anything significant to a DAO or to customers and have it work out well? Any guidelines or lessons? I have a thought on this, but I'll let you all take it first as well.
Sorry, could you reiterate the question?
Yeah, no worries. How have you seen brands or projects delegate anything significant? So any large decisions or anything like that to a DAO, and have it work out well? Do you have any guidelines or lessons, and perhaps any examples of those?
I can give one. So basically, like, I would say decision-making is still tough in DAOs, right? You shouldn't decentralize, I would say, all of your major like decision-making as a brand through a DAO. We should actually take lessons from how startups grow. Like first startup phase, like you have a clear CEO making decisions, and then slowly you get bigger and bigger and start having more responsibilities. The very end stage, you have a public company that actually goes public and now is able to share responsibilities over all shareholders, right? You need someone with clear vision at the start, and then maybe towards the end, you can decentralize more of the decisions. So you probably have to take these learnings and bring them into the DAOverse. At a very small scale, it works well. So for example, Constitution DAO or Pleaser DAO, where they're buying specific NFTs, small group of people, and they're just making 0 or 1 decisions. And so it's not very complex. But if you want to like lead a company, it's incredibly complex to do this through a DAO. So I would say maybe like smaller decisions that are more.
Yeah, I have a pretty good example to layer on top of that. One of my favorite projects in this space is this project called Jenkins the Valet. And I won't get into the weeds around what this project is, but it's basically a decentralized story. And they have a New York Times bestselling author writing the narrative. But the story itself is community owned and governed. So, going from point A to B is mostly driven by the author, but there are certain decisions within the story that the community can vote on. So it still helps to have kind of that leader, that leading voice guiding everything, but there are certain decisions that perhaps might not affect everything, but still brings in the community involvement where they get to participate and feel a much greater connection, I guess, to the story or project or brand.
No,
How about you, Ollie?
they're good examples. I'm like, I participated early in a couple of DAOs and just kind of jumped fully in, really excited, and was left quite somewhat frustrated by the experience and the amount of governance involved in it. So I sort of stepped away for a while from that. And, you know, I think that controlling what capabilities and rights and governance are given over is really important. The best people I know in this space, or the most interesting to me, is a company called finance.vote, and they're trying to build like a Microsoft 365 Office type DAO tools, and they're really interesting to listen to. So if you're constructing one, or you're thinking about doing that with your brand, they're like governance academics at heart, and really interesting to speak to now that, you know, they've been working in this governance space for decades, and now this DAO thing's like blown up, and they're trying to, you know, figure out how they put those things into practice. So they're an interesting team and worth speaking to about it.
Great example. My last question over the next 3 or 4 minutes, Shiv and Ollie, how can folks attending and listening later work with you all? Shiv, we'll start with you.
Yeah, totally. Honestly, just reach out and ask me like, hey, Shiv, we have this idea or this project. How can we get it done? Happy to talk through like technical feasibility, give you guys a little deck or something that tells us how we would approach the project, and then get it done. I think we're super execution focused and just get it done right the first time. So that's like our major focus, I think. And obviously engaging with folks like Radicle or Palm is like fantastic on the creative insight side and things. And I think I'll let Ollie chat for himself.
Yeah, I would add Shiv has a great team and experience there, you guys. So that's an awesome offer from him. One thing we've done at Palm and been doing so far this year, we've probably vetted about 200 of these sort of like blockchain agnostic NFT tools. And as a result of that, have a very short list of ones that we vetted that think work very well with companies that aren't crypto native and understand them, and often have prior experience working in them, are very specific at what they do, and are not just generalists saying that they'll build anything for you. And you know, and have track record and actual demos and tools, and are not just showing you Figma or PDFs in this space. So it's taken a lot of work to get down to a manageable number of delivery partners we have, and happily work through Drew and you know, see if we can help assemble from a vetted list people that you should really be thinking about building in the space with.
Awesome. Well, we're right on time. So that being said, thank you everybody for participating. Thank you to those that are listening later on in the recording. We'll make sure all of the registrants get the recording of both the audio piece, but as well as anything that came up in the chats as well. And yeah, thank you, Shiv and Ollie, mostly for being a participant today. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yes, exciting stuff as always, and pleasure, Drew and Ollie.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
All right,
Cheers,
thank
everybody.
you. Bye.